Okay. So now you know the center, and you have the brochures there that will tell you a little bit more about the center. So you can take that brochure with you and read a little bit about the center there. This session, as hosted by the center, is one of those dialogues that we would like to have, and this one focuses on the data sharing perspective. How do we access the data to be able to enable the economic growth within the country? And the focus for today, it's skewed a little bit more from the local government. And there's a very important reason why you would look at the local government, because this is where you interface. It's an interface to everyone in the country. It doesn't matter whether you are in an affluent area or in the poorest area. The first level of government that you interface with is with the local government. And if we can be able to find a way and a guideline that can guide us to sharing data across different local government authorities, it will enable us to go further. Whether you are talking about the metro, you are talking about the district municipality, or you are talking about the local government, local municipality, or you are even talking about the traditional authority. When you have things like disasters, for instance, as an example, those disasters cannot necessarily say that this is a disaster for the city of Johannesburg, and will therefore respect the borders and stop within the city of Johannesburg and not go to city of Ekurhuleni. So you don't need, for you to be prepared, you don't need to have data across all of those. So how do we enable that particular sense? The data could be also used for economic purposes, either by companies as well. But it's also important to understand that there's a lot of important data that is held by the private sector that could enable better preparedness and better economic opportunities as enabled by the government. So this session, we are going to basically spend our time looking at examples from other areas and looking at those opportunities. What are the actual opportunities? And the end result of it is that it should not be just a talk. It should be that following this talk, we create a community that will assist our municipalities to be able to, build the guidelines that will enable data to flow, to enable those economic opportunities. So to start us off, I have put in a guest speaker here, and I'll introduce him just briefly. I was asking him if he had brought something that everybody could recognize him by, but he then told me that that specific suit that he had is retired, so he's not going to have it. We have Dr. Padile Hotla, who's our guest speaker today. He's a director of the Economic Modeling Academy, which aims to empower bureaucrats, civil society, academia, corporations in the use, application, and policy engagement with integrated web-based tools of economic scenario setting, quantification, monitoring, and evaluation. You can see that is actually linked to what I've just said. What I want to just highlight, instead of reading his full biography, which you can find on the website of this particular conference, I just want to highlight that this is what he does now. Prior to that, he is the former Statistician General of South Africa. And he's going to then set the stage for the conversation that we are going to have today. Dr. Lola.
Open data and smart city. The way I wanted to approach the question of open data is probably from a political economy of data, rather than looking into the mechanics and machinations of information. Because as we enter the information age, I served as a member of the 25-person panel advising Ban Ki-moon on data revolution. And parts of our concerns were a lot more about the political economy of how not to leave anyone behind in this. Yet, again and again, we realize that we leave everybody behind, largely because of the tyranny of statistics, data, money, and technology. And all that depends as to in whose hands those are. And once they are in those hands, the commons get destroyed. So if I were to stop talking, that's the central message I have to have. But Daremba Ndadaba will be very disappointed if that's the only message I provide. I think he needs to see more. So one has to ask, what are the mission challenges smart cities should resolve? What forces influence the space economy and agglomerations? The role of data and technology in mission challenges, and what are the preconditions for meeting these mission challenges or resolving those? And under what structures is it possible? You will see that I have some bias on statistics, having been the head of statistics office for 17 years. That has grown in my mind. And then, of course, finally dealing with the tragedy of the commons, because it is a tragedy. Data is commons. Yet it faces the tragedy of the commons, and it also faces the tragedy of the private. So what is it that we are trying to resolve? The mission challenges are translating a socially desirable goal by deploying a politically compelling and economically feasible agenda. It must be socially desirable, it must be compelling politically in terms of the mission, and economically it must be feasible. This is the space in which data should play. Yet, and I have to give some examples, because it's smart cities, I have to give you some examples of how cities operate, and probably those are the challenges that smart cities should resolve. Here what you see is a work that we did in KwaZulu-Natal, the first survey of citizens' satisfaction run by Stats SA. I see Edroy is here, and he's likely to go and tell the statistician general that I was using this publicly available data. Hopefully you will think that he'll give you a promotion. I hope he doesn't. Edroy. Now, what you see here is the level of satisfaction of citizens in different types of municipalities in what we call human settlements. Now, we have to start by saying, what is a human settlement? And I'm sure it's there under the Human Settlements Ministry. That a human settlement is that settlement where you are a citizen that takes charge of your own destination, satisfied with the services that are available to you at a price that they are given. But when you look at these services by type of municipality, the level of dispersion of satisfaction tells you that this is not a human settlement at all. It can't be. Because the level of dispersion across different services, and the smart city must solve that problem of how is the dispersion from a type B4 house, a type B4 in housing, the level of satisfaction is just 27%. For electricity, or of electricity is about 60%. That level of dispersion tells you that you cannot study in that house, the children cannot grow up in that house. So is the case for all municipalities. KwaZulu-Natal was very bold to allow us run this survey. It's continuing to run, and they use it as a guide to understand what the smart city or smart village should look like. The other provinces said, no, it was close to the election. They didn't want to know this truth. All of them. So they had to employ somebody that they know and who can come and cheer them, and so KwaZulu-Natal, they said they were going to do it. And when they said they were going to do it, I said, you'll mess it up. I'd rather do it. Because part of the problem that we have is that if a statistics office doesn't take charge of this, then you create asymmetries in information. And those asymmetries undermine the democracy completely. So we are faced with that asymmetry that KwaZulu-Natal continues to know a little bit more about itself compared to other provinces. So you can see that we have to resolve this. It's an urgent matter. In relation to transport, the choices of transport towards taxis, away from rail and bus, trains and so on, are forced movements from there. And not because people want taxis, but because that's the most costly convenient. So it has all those, the buses are not there, the trains are not there. So in terms of a smart city, you want mobility, access to, this cannot be a smart city. And this is according to State SA, that you can see that the barriers to mission challenges of smart cities, these are the ones. And finally, people are now moving away from reasons for using specific modes of transport. It's not so much travel time as it is travel costs. And of course, with the rails not being there and everything, you know that this is a problem. Now, what informs, what are the forces influencing space economy and agglomerations? Edroy, you did this at Cruise, didn't you? Yes. Urban Function Index and the Central Place Index. This is the 50 positions of cities in South Africa, the first 50. With Sandton having been the first, Johannesburg the second, Pretoria, and so on and so on. And then, of course, Bochum, my darling, right at the end there. You can't find it. It's all there, Bochum, my darling. And this hierarchy of space is a function of economic activity. And as we enter the information era, we are actually challenged by how the space economy functions. So the smart city is driven largely by economic activity. I don't know whether there's a pointer here. Economic activity, which is the land, which is agriculture, mining, extractive industries, up to level 9, which is government and everything. Now, something has happened, and of course, something has happened with COVID that tells us a serious change that is taking place and how that may influence space economy. For instance, with COVID, we found that, oh, what happened? Oh, there. What had I done? Oh, I see. What did I say? Okay, yes, the pointer there. I was pointing, but I don't know what happened. Why did it? It doesn't seem to be giving us, but you can hear me, but the people online will not if I move from here. Okay. Why is the laser disappearing? But anyway, assume that the laser worked. Here we are actually seeing, trying to demarcate this by primary, secondary, and tertiary, and look at what influences space economy across time. When Johannesburg was established with the discovery of gold in 1867 or thereabout, and Kimberley, what was driving the space economy was the primary economic factors. And over time, then we had manufacturing. But COVID has taught us something, that the tertiary economic forces are driving agglomerations. Of course, they have been. Your Sandtons and so on, they are capital cities. But it is not that is driving this, because increasingly we see people working from home. If you look at that graph on the left, or it's on the right from your side, most people who are in the tertiary space can work from home. And as people start working from home, there are other forces at play. It's no longer your agglomerates, such as, because they could still function from home, working in a bank. So the tertiary sector has no longer the key influence of agglomerations because of the drive by technology. So it looks like in the future, agglomerations will be driven by residents. And it will be the safety and security of that residence. So it's not an accident that Dubai and the Emirates are saying, you can work anywhere in the world, come and locate in Dubai. And that safety, that ambience that is there, will actually cause agglomerations. And that's what the power of technology is, and that's how the smart city will look like. So commerce, finance, culture might be the most predominant driver of agglomerations, or will manifest itself in those agglomerations as a driver of agglomerations. So cultural, economic, geography will be the main things. Then in the context of this, something we have to understand, and it comes from Marx, and it's in chapter 15 of his book, of his volumes. And he says just that in relation to technology, and he talks about the machine, and the machine, you can replace it with technology, that you cannot be a machine that assumes a dwarf-like character. And that dwarf-like character is the fiefdoms that try to come up in the face of the ubiquitous technology. Technology is ubiquitous, you can't own it. And that's where the commons come in. And a machine that assumes a dwarf-like character of monopolies, small monopolies here in the face of technology are doomed to die. For instance, Esri now is making its products visibly available because of the influence of Google. Otherwise, Esri, you had to get a license, and now they are saying, no, the space, the spatial data sets are now available. They are collaborating with census offices in order to make this more valuable. The point about this is that connectivity driven by machines, connectivity driven by internet and everything, enables us to exploit an otherwise economic product that is non-rival. Data is non-rival. You can have it, I can have it. You can read. Of course, if I ate the meat there and ate 2 pieces, Dr. Andatlapa, I wouldn't have had the second piece because I'd have eaten it. But with data, you will find it still there. So the non-rival nature of data says that there is no scarcity. It defies the economic concept of scarcity. It is abundant. And with more and more of it, the use and the value increases. There is not even a marginal, marginal utility on the second, on the third, on the fourth. Actually, the marginal utility expands. It expands. You divide it by a fraction, a less than 1 figure. And then the marginal utility. So we are entering a space of economics that are very, very different. So we shouldn't assume, as our strategic intent, to assume a dwarf-like character. I'll try and go very fast. I don't know how much time we have. So I looked at what Spina says. Spina is a grand philosopher. I invited him here in South Africa for the International Statistics Institute, having read his paper in 2009, having read his paper that he delivered to the European statisticians in 2001. So 2009, I said, Spina, I want you to come and meet you in person. So invited him here. And one of the things that he really brought into my faith was this question of forms of information. And the one on knowledge is a very important one. He writes quite extensively on that. But the criteria, the binding of criteria, and knowledge as a driver of progress, rather than information as in the Shwashi or the other things that we learn. So now, the preconditions here for a knowledge society as a data-fied society are that, that society, knowledge must be available. Information must be available everywhere, all at the same time. And that's what they say does. Publish the information to everybody. No minister will come and say, can I see the results so that I can respond to my electorate? No. The data comes to everyone all at the same time. And this knowledge must be complete, available everywhere, and so on. But there are preconditions on this. And the preconditions are non-technological. They are not the things that we are talking about. The technological constraints have been resolved. But those relate to literacy, promotion of use. That's the yellow suit. That's how I thought I would promote use of statistics. Promotion of access and basic freedoms, the democracy that we have to enjoy in relation to that. And these then relate to the forms of knowledge. So knowledge as information. They said that, well, something's happening. You don't know whether it is $4 million or is $60 million. It is not very clear. But that form of knowledge is a semantic form, and irrespective of empirical validity or pragmatic relevance. We'll hear that when the courts start the case on Palapal. That will be clarified at that point. But it's a semantic form of knowledge. Knowledge as understanding is that which is scientific. That's what CSIR is about. That's what STSSA is about. That's what all the other research institutions strive to be. But there's also knowledge as insight, competence, and authority. That is where it is selected, applied differently, like the debate that we are having now around just transition. That knowledge is chosen. Are we using coal? Are we using gas? Are we using renewables? Why do we use them? So it's knowledge applied as choice. And these choices are laden with probably ideological orientations and the like. And we must be reminded by H.G. Wells that in the future, which is today, numeracy will be essential to humanity, as is the ability to read and write. We are in that space which H.G. Wells opined on 100 years ago. So in order to really get into powered by information, by data, we need to actually be driven by these mission challenges of policy mobilization. And if we think about the structure of doing that, you could actually think about at the top political authority, mass media planning, and then at the right, which is the working robot, statistics, data, and technology authority, really informing the planning authority of a country where the agenda is set in terms of those circles. And finally, I think when we come to what it is that we need to do is a posture of a restored commons. Are we assuming a posture of a restored commons, or are we one that is driven by a tragedy of the commons, whereby over there you can see, don't know, going back, whereby, can I borrow so that the people at the far end can still hear me? But I just want to illustrate how this works here. At the lower end here, okay. At the lower end here, it is the tragedy of the commons. You know where the tragedy of the commons come from. It was about enclosures in the UK, so that you preserve your rights for grazing. If you graze in communal land, you graze. So the tragedy of the commons start there. But along this line, if we actually enclose and be driven by money, the tyranny of money, data, and technology, we end up here on the tragedy of the private. So what we have to do is to maximize the area under the curve. And therefore, this might be somewhere here, so that Both ends actually benefit. Data is a commons. It's not something that is private. It's a commons. It is mine, it is yours. And those who collect it through smartphones cannot claim it to be proprietary data. It isn't. It is our data. And democratizing it as a commons is the way to go. But while we do that, we must appreciate investments that go in there so that it doesn't become a commons. Thank you very much.